is a short video continuing through Anselm's Proslogion. In chapter 4, after giving the ontological argument and exposing the fool who says in his heart there is no God, this being a character mentioned in the Psalms, the Old Testament, after giving the ontological argument, exposing the fool who denies the existence of God as indeed a fool, Anselm in chapter 4 makes a distinction in order to explain how the fool is able to say that God does not exist, even though if you look at the meaning of the proposition God does not exist, God does not exist is not a proposition that can actually be entertained. But he explains how the fool is still able to say it because he doesn't understand the significance of his own words, okay? And then Anselm very piously says, "Thanks be to you, my good Lord. Thanks be to you." This is the end of chapter 4. "For what I once believed through your grace, I now understand through your illumination, so that even if I do not want to believe that you exist, I cannot fail to understand that you exist." He thanks God for helping him add some understanding to his faith. What I once believed through your grace, I now understand through your illumination. Let's go to chapter 5. The Proslogion must be understood not simply as the source of the ontological argument, but it must be understood, well, we could comment on various aspects of the text, but it must be understood to comment on just one or two aspects of the text. It must be understood as a pious reflection, indeed a prayer, on the subject of the idea of the greatest possible being. God is the greatest possible being, and this idea gives Anselm the ontological argument, but then it gives him a lot of other stuff. Having begun with the idea that God is the greatest possible being, he's used it to give his proof that God exists, the ontological argument in chapters 2 and 3, and then he spends the rest of the book reflecting on the idea of God as the greatest possible being. And it allows him to do a lot of cool things. It allows him to demonstrate certain characteristics of God. It allows him to solve a couple of puzzles in philosophical theology. We're not going to be thorough in all those things here. The Proslogion is a strongly recommended reading and quite short. You can read a lot of this for yourself. Let's look at chapter 5 as the first step towards doing all these other things, doing his other pious reflections on the idea of God as the greatest possible being. Oh, it's not just solving problems in philosophical theology, demonstrating some characteristics of God. It's also stirring up his own affections towards God. It's about loving God better. The Proslogion is about loving God better. Now, chapter 5. "Then what are you, Lord God, than whom nothing greater can be thought? What are you, if not the greatest of all beings, who alone exists through himself and made all other things from nothing? For whatever is not this is less than the greatest that can be thought, but this cannot be thought of you. What good is missing from the highest good, through which every good thing exists? And so you are just, truthful, happy, and whatever it is better to be than not to be." God is the sum of all perfections, the unity of all goodness. God is whatever it is better to be than not to be. That follows from the idea of God as the greatest possible being, and that will lead into all these other pious reflections in the book that are to come. Anselm's Proslogion, strongly recommended reading. We'll go over more of the book in subsequent videos. And I'm working here with the Thomas Williams translation, published by Hackett, which is recommended for most purposes. There's probably a decent public domain translation online somewhere, and I'm sure there are various other decent translations available. See you next time.